Hey there, Dr. A here, CEO and founder of the Learning Liaisons, and I want to welcome you to this video module where we're going to be talking about how to use study guides. Right? I know it sounds silly, like why am I watching a video on how to use study guides? Duh, I just read it from front to back and take all the practice tests and take notes. Well, actually, that's a big proponent of why people keep failing these tests. So we have to have a little conversation about how to use study guides. This is very important. One of the biggest things you have to understand so you don't fall in the pitfall when most, or I should say majority of teachers and college students like yourself keep failing this test and walking out of the testing center going, why did I just spend 3 weeks studying this book when nothing in the book was on the test or looked anything like the questions? So that's why. That is why we need to talk about study guides and how to use them, because there's such a disconnect between the study guides and the actual exam. And it doesn't matter what study guide you have. I don't care what people say or what the authors say or the companies say. No guide will replicate the real deal exam. Questions will be harder, they'll be different, they'll be shaped differently. It's all about strategy and concepts. And we're going to talk about that here today. So this is kind of what a lot of people feel like, right? You feel like this guy here jumping off and just missing it every single time, right? Hopefully you've never taken your FTCE exam today and I caught you before you made that mistake of taking those guides as the Holy Grail, right? Because people go crazy. They go nuts all the time, especially when they spend so much time with the book and they go take the test and they're angry, they're mad. Why does the state of Florida give a test that's not like the guides? Because there's no connection between the two. And some people actually want to light it on fire. I had a teacher last year. Never forget, I was at a university. Actually, a school district. And that time, and one of the teachers like, yeah, literally, I threw it outside and I lit it on fire. I'm like, whoa, that's bad on so many levels. But you don't want to burn your book. It's not a waste of time. I'm going to explain to you how to use your study guide effectively here today. Because remember, it's all about how you use your guide. I don't care what guide you have, as long as it's somewhat up to date, published in the last couple of years, because you have to remember, and this is relevant to your exam, like using the GK as an example. GK was revised in 2014, so every teacher who took it January 1st, 2015 has a totally different test. And it has minor changes here and there, which I address in my workshops. But it's a total change. So if you use something out of date, 2015, 2014, 2013, it's not going to be aligned with the test. Same thing with the professional ed. Same thing with the elementary ed. Whatever guide or whatever test you're taking, make sure that it is aligned. The competencies are aligned. So I don't care what test prep guide you buy as long as it's aligned with the competencies, because remember, it's not about the questions in there. You're never going to see them on the guide. You're never going to see all the content on the test. You're never going to see all the questions in the guide on the test. It's how you use them, which I'm going to go over. All right, so it's all about self-assessment and practice. And if you're participating in one of my video courses, hopefully this is one of those buzzwords that I say all the time, because guides and resources are about self-assessment, practicing, and repeating, right? A lot of people, and maybe you fall into this boat, you just feel like you're confused and alone, right? You're looking at the guy, maybe you've taken the test a couple times and you just have not had success. So if your goal when using your guide, I don't care whatever guide it is, insert whatever title, XAM, REA, Cliff Notes, doesn't matter. If your goal when you buy a guide off online or in a bookstore is to memorize content, memorize vocab words, or memorize questions, you are going to fail. You're going to fail. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a very small percentage of college students and classroom teachers that can go on Amazon, buy a Cliff Notes book, study it for a couple weeks, and go out there and pass. They're not geniuses. Nope, they're not a genius. They're just a good test taker, and they have a pretty good handle on the content, right? It's not a big deal. But when you read it and you take it as the Holy Grail and you memorize everything, and especially the questions, that's where we get into a lot of trouble. And that's what the majority of teachers and college students do, because it doesn't matter what you think, like The Rock used to say. There is no secret guide that's going to give you all the answers. You can buy as many guides as you want, and if you try to memorize all those questions and all those words, you're going to drive yourself bananas, and you're not going to pass. Okay, so there's a 3-step process that I talk about in most of my video courses and in my workshops when I do them face-to-face for districts and universities. So I talk about this. Very simple, but most people don't complete this process. They do step number 1. When you use a study guide, because you need some sort of study guide, a prep guide to practice, self-assess the concepts, practice test-taking strategies. So you need some sort of guide. So most people buy the guides, number 1, for practice tests, because you want to practice your skills, right? What most teachers do, and I'm sure you do this, everybody does this, is they'll take a practice test and they'll grade the test and see what they're going wrong and why, right? Sounds pretty simple. So if I'm using like the GK, for example, and I take a math practice test for GK math, and there are 45 questions in it, and let's say I get 20 of them wrong, right? I'm going to look in the back and check my answer sheet and say, number 3, I put B. The answer is D. They give a little explanation as Y. Great. Move on to number 10. I put A. The answer is D. Same thing. And they go on and they check all their answers. Well, what do most people do after that? Right? You might be thinking, well, I'll take it again maybe the next day or the next week, or I'll study the answers that I got wrong and, go over those questions again until I understand how to get the correct answer, right? If you're doing that, that's absolutely wrong. You are wasting time. If you literally, follow me, if you take practice tests in study guides or online, never take them again. You can laugh all you want. I tell people literally, you waste your time, and your time is valuable. You're wasting your time if you repeatedly take a practice test over and over and over again. You know why? Because you're never going to see those questions ever again on the test. You're not. I don't care what people say, you're not. You might see the same concepts, the same ideas, but those same exact questions and that structure is not going to be replicated on the real deal. So you think, well, what am I supposed to do? Isn't that a waste of money? No, it's how you use them. So back to my example, taking a GK math practice test, for example, maybe you're taking ESE, maybe you're taking ESOL, maybe you're taking professional ed, maybe you're taking English 6 through 12, whatever it is. Time yourself, practice the test-taking strategies, grade your test, see what you got wrong and why. Easy, right? Go through, check it, go to the answers, great. Tells me why I got it wrong, awesome. That's step number 1. That's what everybody does. Right? Obviously, you're not going out there and taking a practice test and throwing it in the garbage. You're going to see, that sounds silly, you're going to see what you got wrong and why. That's the first step, easy. Here's where we get into some different things. Second step. Your second step is you're going to do a tally system. So for example, using my example I said before, GK math subtest. Let's say you're taking and this applies to any test. Don't think, well, I'm not taking GK. I'm just going to shut this off. This is for any test. So for the GK math test, for example, there are 4 math competencies, 4 skills that are tested, right? Number sense, geometry, algebraic expressions, and data and statistics. So whenever I take any practice test, and I'm going to take more than one, if I'm working with a tutor, if I'm using an online website to do practice questions, anytime I get a question wrong, okay, I'm going to go back and see which one of those 4 math skills that question falls into, and I'm going to make a tally mark. So I'm literally going to have like a spiral notebook or a piece of paper with skill 1, 2, and 3 listed, and I'm going to make an ongoing tally for as long as I'm studying over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Every time I do a math question and I get it wrong, I'm going to find out which one of the 4 math skills that question belongs to, and I'll make a tally. And what is that going to do over time? That's going to show me where my deficiencies are, which one of those 4 skills. So if you're professional ed, there are 8 competencies. You do the same thing. Making tally marks. Now, each of these skills, each of these competencies has different numbers of questions on it, which is all published on the Florida DOE, and I go over in my workshops. So it's just a matter of a rolling tally of how you're doing, because that will show you visually where you're deficient at. Like, for example, English language skills on the GK, right? There are 3 skills on that test. Skill number 3 has half of the questions on the subtest, and skill 1 and 2 has a small amount. So if I'm making tallies on all these as I'm studying, then obviously if I'm doing really good on skill 3, which is half the test, and 1 and 2 I'm not doing good at, obviously I'm going to focus on 1 and 2. So that's step number 2. So I'm going to do something like that. I'm going to have my skills. Obviously, this is going to change depending on what test you're doing, right? You have to go and look and see how many skills are being tested. Now, that's easy. So step 1, grading, see what we got wrong and why. Step 2, making that tally sheet. I tell people for whatever test you're taking, spend 99, those 99-cent spiral notebooks like these here, right? Buy one for each subtest or each competency, right? Separate. Organization is a key to success when studying. So you got your first step, see what you got wrong and why. Second step, making your tally. So even if you're taking like PK through 3, right? If you're in the developmental section or the math section, see how many skills are being tested, right? I go over that in my video course. See which skills are being tested and make tallies when you're getting questions wrong on your practice test or your online resources. That's 1 and 2. Now, here's where the work comes in. But if you do this and you do it right, it's going to pay huge dividends. Right? You have to understand, like I said before, the questions you get in any guide, any resource, are going to look nothing like that on the exam. It's all about strategy and concepts. So step number 3. Remember that scenario I gave you a couple minutes ago? Taking GK math subtest, 45 questions, I get 20 wrong, right? I'm going to go through all of my 20 questions that I got wrong. This is after I do my tallies, after I check and do my tally. Every question I get wrong, I'm going to go to it. I'm going to find out what concept is being tested. So for example, if I get a question wrong that has me figure out the slope of something, right? Figure out slope. And I do miscalculations, I get it wrong, okay? When I go back and after I do my tally, right, I'm going to go back to that question, the concept slope. In my spiral notebook, I'm going to write down slope. I'm going to write down the definition of slope. And I'm going to write down 2 or 3 examples of it. So regardless, if you're doing professional ed and you get a question wrong on discovery learning, you write discovery learning, define what it is, and a couple of examples of it. So if you see, as you do this for every time you get a question wrong, I'm not talking about one practice test, anything, one-off questions in a book, something a colleague or a friend shares with you, and online resources, anytime you get anything. This is like your journal in essence. You're going to write down the concept, the definition, and other examples. What does it look like? Because you know what? If you nail down these concepts and study these lists that you make, it doesn't matter what the question looks like on the real deal exam, you're going to know what the concept is about. So you're going to be able to look at the question and go, oh, I know what they're talking about here, because you understand the concept. This is the problem, one of my pet peeves, which if you've taken my workshops or you're in one right now watching this, one of my pet peeves is the teachers and college students out there that their number one goal, and I see it all the time when I visit schools, visit universities, even in various online platforms. The number one goal for a lot of people out there, I'm not saying you, but you might be guilty of this, who knows? The number one goal for most test takers is to search. Who knows the questions from the test? Who just took it? What's the prompts you saw? All of these things, and all they do is obsess over memorizing things and memorizing questions. And guess what? You're not necessarily going to get it. There are thousands of questions in the bank. Essay prompts for tests change all the time. If you're going to program yourself for those questions, you're going to get it wrong, possibly, but you might not even see it. And guess what if you don't see it? You're going to get even more stress. You're going to add more stress to an already stressful situation. So I'm deadly opposed to that. When anyone comes to me with questions and asking me for that stuff, that's not my game. That's why so many teachers I work with are so successful, because it's all about strategy and concepts. You don't want to add more stress to an already stressful situation. So like I said before, if your goal is, when using a study guide, is to do any of these things on the screen, memorizing content, memorizing vocab words, memorizing questions, I'm telling you, it's a recipe for disaster. You cannot listen to me if you want, but I do this every day for the past 5 years. I see it time in and time out. I can't tell you how many people that I met that can give me the definition of a vocab word like that. But if I put it in a question or a scenario, whoa, right? They can't answer it. They get confused. They overanalyze things, right? It's all about knowing strategy and concepts, right? And that's how it's done. I know it sounds simple, But people do step number 1, but most people do not do step number 2, and hardly anybody I talk to, and I work with about 200 new teachers every single month, nobody really writes down the concepts and goes back and take notes and makes examples, because that's how you really are going to nail down the concepts so you know them when you see them in another form on an exam. So I know you can do it, but it's got to be done the right way. Now, this should be applied when studying for any FTCE exam. Doesn't matter. Even if you're watching this and you happen to stumble on this video on YouTube or a Vimeo or anything and you're in another state, same thing. Even your kids. If you're a classroom teacher, your students studying for FSA exams or end of course exams or whatever, same thing. When they're going through the lessons and the activities throughout the week and whatever in that unit, they can do this too, right? You have to get in the rhythm of understanding concepts so they can be applied any type of question. So if you don't care about this, right? If you don't care, you got to understand that no guide has the same concepts or same questions from the test. They're making educational guesses based on the blueprint, right? Or some people call them the test specs. It's all the same stuff. They're listed on the state of Florida's website. And all they're doing is looking at those and creating guides and creating questions that are aligned with it. So please do not take it for the Holy Grail and memorize it. That's a big trap that a lot of people do. And some people do it and they do it subconsciously. They don't even realize it. Because think about it. When you were younger, when you had to take the SAT or the ACT, for example, what'd you do? You went and bought a guide, right? You went to the store, you went online, you bought a guide, you study from it. It helped you. It helped you do well. It helped you get better, because it's aligned with the test and the questions look similar. These tests here in Florida, they don't look like the book. Now, I know people complain and stuff. I'm not the state or anything. That's just the way it is. But you don't want to memorize things because you're not going to see them on the test. That's just the reality of it. All right. So if you really like this and you want more, if you are not in a course right now watching this, maybe you got this as a one-off video course to learn a little bit about me and the workshops and kind of the philosophies behind it. You can go to the website there and just click the buttons, whichever one you are, and you could sign up for one of our workshops. And if you haven't done so already, we just started this new private FTCE group. There it is right there, the group. It's called When You Pass. Just ask you to what test you're prepping for, put it in there, and request submission. And there's Miss Dominique there. She is the group moderator, and she takes care of everything there as well as myself. So hopefully I can't wait to see you on the inside. So if you're sitting here saying, make it stop, this is ridiculous, this is phooey, it makes no sense, well, good luck to you. Because if your goal is to go out there and do the opposite of what I'm telling you, the stats don't lie. You know, all of these tests, with the exception of a couple of them, have extremely low first attempt pass rates. So my job is to help teachers and college students like yourself. So I'm giving you and modeling for you and showing you and discussing with you the best strategy and the best way to look at certain things when prepping for your Florida teacher certification exam. So I wish you good luck. And like I tell everybody out there when I talk to them, it's all about when you pass, not if you pass. Remember that. It's when you pass, not if you pass. So once again, my name is Dr. A. I am the CEO and founder of the Learning Liaisons. And I want to congratulate you for taking the time to spend with me here today. And I'll see you on the inside.